time to talk about literally the oldest character in the series, Raven. Dating back to the 5th century medieval Germany, Raven experienced an interesting accident where, instead of dying, he was left immortal. He also gained the powers of healing, which he used to help a village. Going far and wide after leaving that village to heal others, he came back to the same village, and because of certain accidents, they blamed him. So he saw himself instead of as a god, to as a simple repairman. As many times as Raven would try to die, he could not. The one thing that would give Raven pleasure was his own pain, until he met Asuka Arkreutz, or that man, whose plans made him interested. So until the end of Guilty Gear XR Revelator, he served that man faithfully. When they are about to part, he questions that man about the existence of God. He states that in his immortal position, he would like to be a storyteller for people to gain meaning from. We haven't really seen Raven yet in Shrive, but we do know he loves to disintegrate himself. Hello, this is David Lee with the Philosophy of Big Game Philosophy, and we're going to talk about a non-Guilty Gear Strive Guilty Gear theme. Well, two actually, both related to Raven. And Raven is an interesting one and has some very deep themes. So, I'm David Leibowitz. I know my psychology, my philosophy, my Jung, and I'm a singer. I'm not as much into the musical theory side, but I will give you my best. So without further ado, Tsuki no Shihai. Alright, that first verse, we had a lot of biology stuff going on. Basically, we start with the notion of birds fly according to instinct. Birds fly according to instinct. This notion is basically saying that a bird knows how to fly, knows how to live. Raven is trying to be in line with life, but he can't because he can't die. Because the other side of living is dying. The notion that when we live our lives in the notion that we eventually will die, because that's the circle of life. If there were so many people on this planet that no one died, then it would be overpopulated, and it wouldn't ultimately lead to development. And evolution doesn't necessarily need to be actually about progress. It's just about change and newness. What's going on with Raven is that he fundamentally can't die. Raven is immortal, and that has lost him pleasure. So when you fly, don't lose your wings, even if they turn to ash. This partial notion that when you don't lose your wings, that when you fly, this is the idea of trying to get flying towards the sun. When you fly, and Icarus, of course, goes towards the sun, he burns and he falls back to Earth. And even so, the wings turn to ash and flying towards the sun, but going down. But he's really, in reality, flying towards the moon, which will not burn him, which will leave him in this endless state of death, of life-death, which is sort of this Buddhist emptiness. It's sort of like he's reached, in a way, nirvana, where he's left the cycle of reincarnation. Or he's forever stuck in the cycle of reincarnation, either way, which is very different, but for this, it's similar. That he's dissatisfied with that. He can never fully reach nirvana because he forever lives a life of suffering. But suffering is his salvation. Let's continue. So basically, that's already a little big. Raven is not actually a scientist. I thought Raven is a scientist. Crow, there's a character called Crow, similar name, apparently same voice actor. That's the scientist who made RoboKai and stuff. Raven is not a scientist, but this is very much, you have this notion of Raven becoming a machine. Because this is, I'm very opposed to the ideas of Ray Kurzweil, who wants us, and the futurists, the transhumanists that want us to turn into cyborgs, turn into machines, and forever leave death. That's leaving away the body. Raven is forever stuck in the body, but he's dissatisfied. So this is ultimately a critique of the transhuman idea that our great intelligence will go throughout the universe, and we will be fully just intelligent beings without the body. Raven keeps on losing his body over and over again, sort of in a very Buddhist fashion. But he keeps on coming back, and he's dissatisfied with that. Sort of forever stuck in that idea of samsara. That he is forever dominated by the moon. Dominated by this emptiness of death. This hollowness. The moon is, in Japanese, is the empty center. He's fundamentally empty because I have Amaterasu, which is the sun, and Susanoo, which is the other side, which is the storms, and they're fighting, and the center is Tsukuyomi, who is fundamentally hollow. Raven is forever hollow and empty and lacking worth. The brain is a device. Heart is an organ. The science, all this desire for that, I completely am against the idea that the brain should be thought of as a machine. The brain is also an organ. The brain is much more complex than just a device. But over time, when you lose the idea of death, the brain turns into a device and the heart is just an organ. A meaningless life, that's death. He's forever in death. He's sort of in this weird Buddhist existence of mind, birth, death. And he's sort of in his lack of hollowness. He needs to get rid of himself further. And he's lacking in ego, but it's this very interesting idea of the existence of being empty, but forever being linked in death. And wanting to, but this notion is actually, in Japanese Jungian ideas, wanting to die is actually wanting to live. So his actual death, he is wanting to live, wanting to die is to wanting to actually live. So he's constantly going through rebirth, but he wants to die properly so his life actually had meaning. But instead, he has to stay immortal, and because he has to stay immortal, he needs to then find a way to give that lack of meaning, rebirth it, and live in this sort of mind, birth, death situation. And basically, that is what leads him to give and tell stories of the past, to give rebirth to the present through the moon. Yeah, he might live, but until there's a what's it called? Nebula? When the stars should get destroyed, and that will be a while, but he could still live that long, and just watching the world just go and be this, well, we'll see. I think this might be a slight, I haven't read too much on Sartre, but I think this is sort of like now Raven's gone to this Sartrean ideas, not Sartre, Camusian idea that, that he needs to be a rebel in some way, and he has to accept the meaningless, the absurdity of existence to lead to not just complain, but to actually rebel and gain something of this absurdity. This riff goes hard. That is the key. So the idea is that this is a 100% critique of transhumanism, that people who want to get rid of their bodies and become machines, that he needs to keep his hollow and emptiness and his empty core in himself, but give it life and meaning. And that's hard when you just keep on living over and over and over again. Let's start at the beginning. Here are closing shoes. Even a map is prepared. This is sort of the idea that even a map is that this is sort of a critique of utopia, a utopian cyborg transhumanist idea where we're all away from the earth, we're all disconnected, we're all living this robot cyborg utopia. And it just doesn't feel the same. You're disconnected from life. It's fundamentally wrong. Living is about, this is definitely Nietzschean. Again, suffering is key. I mean, this guy who gains pleasure from suffering, I mean, Nietzsche doesn't want you to suffer, is not a masochist. But through suffering, you gain, how does this? You gain growth. And in Buddhism, the suffering, to deal with suffering, you have to get rid of the self. But Braven is fundamentally tied in this, connected to this one life. He can't be, he can be reborn in himself. He can have that sort of Jungian rebirth, but because it's still just him, he hasn't actually reincarnated anything. He isn't the bird that is allowed to carry over to the next life to be properly reincarnated. He has so much knowledge that it's just meaningless. Like, you've learned so much. There's so much to devise, so many evil or different plans to have, and they just don't mean anything anymore. A life that has lived so long, even though it sounds cool, is painful, is suffering. An eternal life is basically death. So I think this is powerful, and before becoming a machine foreseeing the future, that we're just walking machines that are fundamentally disconnected from the earth. He's trying to reconnect with the earth, like to connect with the earth and the moon and the universe. He's disconnected. He's in his sort of paradoxical self that is holding him, even though it's a non-self. It's just his consciousness is in too many places, and he feels fundamentally conflicted and empty. So what is the moon? What is the moon? The moon is, someone actually say that people are most likely to kill themselves during the moon. The moon is lunacy. It's our dark emotional instincts. Before that, one wants to live, but eventually the moon will lead you into this sort of death. In the Nietzschean sense, that Nietzsche thinks that the people who are oriented towards the moon, the coldness of the moon, as opposed to the sun, look at the world in this sort of death state. That death is that they don't fully live in the present. They don't fully live in life. And Ravens try to live in the present. The only way he can do that is through pain, which gives him pleasure. So the moon is what's holding him back, is keeping him in this forever mind-birth death at the same time, in sort of this weird samsara state that is interesting and doesn't allow him to fully go forward. It might be why it's actually in Japanese, because there probably is a lot of Japanese stuff going on here. So, I think the sort of, it's sort of a release. The ending is probably a release of like the again. We're going to the major chord, major key, and also that this sort of like either it's him just hurting himself and feeling, or the possible that he will be a storyteller for people and that he will be happy once and for all by allowing people to sort of be that emissary of knowledge for others, to sort of partake the lessons of his own failures of against these sort of scientific notions that Asuka himself has helped create, and Asuka feels bad about. All right, on to the earlier song, Worthless as the Sun Above the Clouds, if anyone wants to stay with me. If not, you can leave. If you're just here for XR, that's fine, but if you want to hear some banger overture tracks are honestly hugely bangers, let's go. Welcome back. Hello. If anyone came right here from the start, I'm not going to repeat in depth what I said for Tsuki no Shihai. I will definitely bring in the parts of the song that are new. It's definitely, it's deep and it sounds great. I don't know how much is left to talk about, but I didn't want to neglect this song. So for anyone who likes Guilty Gear 2 Overture music or has actually played it, I have not. But it's a good track. So, Worthless as the Sun Above the Clouds, going back in time. Whoa! Oh, this slaps. So, I thought this was a very different attitude from Raven, but I realized it's just more edgy. It's equally just, it's the same attitude. Basically, he's saying, we start off with the idea that he is the king. King I am. This is a reference to him being worshipped as a god, sort of a messiah figure, Jesus-like, in a way. But basically, yeah, he's inevitable, invincible. The death, he is immortal. He's sort of viewing it more as him trying to aspire to be a godly figure in a way. Watching them suffer, he's watching everyone else suffer and die while he has to remain forever. Yeah, let's see if there's anything else in here. And he's worthless as the sun above the... He's worthless as... the sun above the clouds is worthless because the sun, it's still the moon, but we're not as the moon yet. The sun above the clouds, we don't see the light, we don't see the warmth. There is no warmth. It's still a vague... You sort of get as his empty existence, that is hollow existence, that is forever in this limbo state. He's lost faith in God because when you're immortal, you are the God. He is trying to be the God. There's no more prayers. There is no afterlife. The earth is only it, and it's sad. And the world's house, star shine, the moon, all these time, but he's forever. That's the cycle. He's beyond the cycle, and it's sad. Oh God, this is so hard. Let's just jam to this, please. It's just sort of like this feeling of intense, the pain, sort of you're hitting yourself in pain, and you're trying to feel that life in you, but you can't feel it. You still can't. Oh, it just hits so hard. Yeah. I like to just let the songs play. I don't like to just listen to the whole thing. Now you're starting to hear a little... Now you're starting to hear a little bit of suspense in the notion that he doesn't feel himself as clearly. Like, he sort of had this mania rush, and now he's going back to the earth. But he's still not fully on the earth. He's still in this limbo suspense. Holmes, raise your hand at the Spanish guitar. I think that's what it is your favorite instrument. Me, it's mine. So that was great. Basically, all I wanted to know is like forever just to live and know and learn, but it's fundamentally you're deep in shame, you're vain, you're grim, pale, grim, deep in shame. All I want is to know my fate is so. The fate is to be forevermore. To live forever, which is sad. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. It's not good. It's just not good to be immortal. It just... see what... Well, what's it? So the bird's singing, that's the day. The bird is sort of like in the high-minded stuff. The wolf is sort of the more instinctual. And he's caught in between, but he's in this limbo but in between. And he can't fully reach either. And that's what he is. He's lifeless. Even bare mountains make trees cry. He's forever he's a bare mountain. And not to attack bare mountains. Buddhism have life and soul and all that. But the trees, he's not even a tree. A tree dies. A tree will live for many, many years. But the trees, some of these live for thousands. But the bare mountain, it's lifeless. He's lifeless. He's a robot. It's not the same. The void is empty. He's empty. He's a paradox. He's an enigma. He is nothing. He's empty. But in this emptiness, can we find somethingness? That's obviously the Buddhist way. Again, this more directly talks about him saying like he is a masochist. He only can feel pleasure from pain. So you see that Tsuki no Shihai is slightly more hopeful than this, especially the ending. Here, there's not that much hope. You then hear that the cacophony of feelings of pain that lead him to this joy, but then it's going to probably go down again. All right, so that was our first Guilty Gear 2 themer. Nagoriyuki is in fact next, and that is also a 2 themer. Nagoriyuki technically has the boss theme crawl is generally plays when you fight Nagoriyuki at the end, and it's basically his theme. So I will do both. I will do what you do fight for first and crawl next afterwards, and I'm excited to talk about that so much. Because we're talking about vampire shadows, baby, and the Japanese past. But with this is just a little last thing. I think we see this notion of presentism. Presentism is that when we forever live in the present. And so people who forever, is sort of the idea that the rapture has already happened. We live in paradise. And there is no death. There is no cacophony. There is no disaster. But you can see the void that is presentism. And it's not pretty. So forever living in the present, forever living is not good. You need to end. You need to change. There needs to be a revolution. There needs to be evolution. You can't just live forever. That stops revolution. And fundamentally, that will go beyond you. You need to be reincarnated. You need to be reborn. So I'm sorry you say, but Raven's theme show, you have to die one day. Because look at the existence that you live in. It's not pretty. Even if Raven will eventually become an immortal storyteller, please, if you believe in heaven, believe in reincarnation, believe in that, you can have that solace. If you believe there's nothing after, evolution, revolution, baby. Just what happens. Well, it's a little sad note to go, but it's the truth. But we got to embrace our bodies. We got to embrace our biological existence. Can't be a robot. Can't be a machine. That's the way of the philosophy spiel. Animality, baby. Without that, again, Nagoriyuki's next. Bang Shishigami also happening. Roar of the Spark might happen later, and Play the Hero after Bang Shishigami. So we'll see what happens. And I got some something great on the horizon I just can't talk about, but it will happen eventually, and it will be beautiful persona-wise. All right. There leaves philosophy. Peace.